Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Downright Upright podcast. My name is Philip Anthony, and this is the first podcast I will be doing. Basically, just an intro so you get to know me and what the podcast is all about. And so, first of all, let's get into my personal life, and we'll go from there. So I was born in New York City, in Brooklyn, actually, in the early 60s. I came from a very traditional Italian family. It was just me and my mom after my dad had passed away before my 5th birthday, tragically. He died tragically. We can get into that in the future show, but and it was very hard for my mom at that time. She, as you know, at that time, JFK was just assassinated a couple of years before that. So this was, and I remember how she would always talk about how horrible of an experience that was for her. Because back then, everybody was, very close to their country, very love of country was very important in those days. There was no such thing as there was, Republicans and Democrats, but it was a more united kind of thing. You just had minor differences, but, obviously today we've definitely been fractured. But anyway, getting back to what happened. So after Dad died, Mom got a job and was able to support me on a single parent salary. She was a secretary, and in those days, it was easier to do. Today, I don't think anyone, working in a job like that, in a clerical job, would be able to support a family. A couple of years after Dad died, she had met another guy, and she married him, and he ended up being a very abusive man, alcoholic and the whole deal. And when I was 12, she divorced him. But in the interim, while she was married to him, and the whole time from dating to the divorce, he ruined my self-esteem. I was a very shy kid to begin with, and his verbal insults were I took them very hard. And it really influenced me with other children, playing with other children. I wasn't comfortable, so I got picked on in school a lot. Fast forwarding to the age of 18, I graduated high school, a very prestigious Catholic high school. My mom, again, she worked her butt off to get me to one of the best schools because that was her goal. She always pushed education. And at that time, before I went to college, graduating high school, I wasn't even out to myself really at that point, because of my Catholic background. You got to, I don't know if you've ever been to Brooklyn in the 60s, but it was a very macho environment. The neighborhood was it was kind of like a gangster kind of environment. Even though there were teenagers, everybody was tough. That's a good way to put it. And here I am, this really quiet, shy kid who didn't listen to heavy metal or rock or anything. I was into more of the bubblegum pop that the girls were listening to. So, yeah, I was very different. Let's just put it that way. And so finally at 18, when I got to college, I came out to myself. And that was just like, being locked in a closet. The feeling of being locked in a closet for days without breathing air or seeing light. And when I met other kids, well, I call them kids now because of my age, but when I went to college, I met other students that were gay as well, and we kind of made like a little group together, and we hung out, and my self-esteem was just great. It started becoming greater and greater and better because, when you see other people like yourself, it's a very different experience when you think you're the only freak in the world, that you're the only gay kid. But I wasn't, and I thought that because, again, I was in a Catholic grammar school, a Catholic high school, very macho. Everybody was on the football team or the basketball team or something, and a jock, and I wasn't. So, well, they were very tough. I wasn't. And so I came out to myself at 18, and then I also came out to my mom at 21, because by 21 I was in college and I started to like myself, and that was the turning point in my life. Now, up to this point, in my teens and up to 20, 21-ish, 22-ish, I was, if you want to call it, a Republican. Don't hate me. I was a Republican. My mom wasn't, but I think I did that as a rebellion against, every kid rebels against their parents. They want to do everything opposite. I remember my mom was a Mets fan in New York, and I had to be a Yankees fan. I loved baseball because of my mom. My mom gave me that background in baseball, and she taught me all about it, and I loved it. But I had to be a Yankees fan because my dad, who had passed away, was a big Yankees fan. And when she told me that, I had to be a Yankees fan, and I had to do something that was the opposite of her. So, that's why I think kids do, rebel. So even though she was a Democrat, I wanted to be different. So I became a Republican. And I remember in college, I had a class called suppository writing, which was a class I took in freshman year in college. And the teacher gave us all a subject. Actually, it was a political subject, and there were different subclasses to that subject, and we had to pick one. So mine was the death penalty. And being the Republican that I was, I felt the death penalty was great. It would discourage people from killing other people, and which, of course, today I know is totally not true. People don't contemplate what they're going to do. Most murders are actually either crimes of passion or crimes that are not well planned out. Sometimes they just happen. Premeditated murder, it does exist, yes, but that's where the death penalty would have come in that case. But I was firmly for the death penalty. I felt it was the best thing. So I wrote this paper on being pro-death penalty, and my teachers gave me an A minus. Would have been an A plus, he said, but I didn't agree with your premise, because people don't. And he even explained, people don't. When these crimes take place, they usually happen at the spur of the moment. They're not well planned out, like a on a blueprint. If it happens, it's done, and it's just from that moment. It's hard to explain what I'm saying, but I think you got the gist. So after writing that paper and getting that feedback, I was like, oh, it's a typical response, from a Democrat, right? But then Ronald Reagan became president, and for years, after the AIDS crisis began in I would say it was 81-ish, because that's the first time I think or 82, when I first started to learn about it. I was already dating someone who ended up being a long-term relationship. So I was with someone at the time, but my friends were all coming down with AIDS. Not all of them, but a large amount of them. And I was so scared, And I kept thinking to myself, well, the president of the United States is not even talking about this. It's not even an issue. I mean, I remember friends at work, straight friends at work that would, when they used to invite me to their house, would have this nice china, nice glasses. But then after the AIDS epidemic began and they knew I was gay because I had come out, because obviously I'm in college now, and again, I'm more comfortable with myself. And they started using plastic forks and knives and paper cups and paper dishes, which to me was, what? What's this? And I was told by one of the girls that I was very, very close with. She actually spilled the beans and told me that this was because she didn't want to get AIDS on her dishes or her. I'm serious. I mean, I can't make this up. Actually, at work, I remember one girl also telling me that people were saying, don't use that water fountain over there, because that was the one near my desk, and that was the one I used. So if you wanted to get AIDS, you would use that one. Don't use it. Use a different one. So I noticed that nobody would ever pass by my desk to use the water fountain back in those days in the 80s during this AIDS crisis. So my mind started changing. I started realizing that marginalized people needed to be spoken for and needed to have a voice. And I started becoming more and more active. And I had friends from all different backgrounds, Puerto Rican friends, because New York is a very cosmopolitan city. So I met friends that were Black, Puerto Rican, Mexican, Latino, different Latino countries, Asian. So, and I started realizing, being gay is also not in the mainstream of society and what it was in those days. So I started gravitating towards people that were going through the same struggle as me. I think that was when I got enlightened. And I didn't vote for Reagan the second time. I definitely didn't. That was the end of my republicanism at that point. And but I did see a lot of friends pass away from AIDS. I did volunteer at the Gay Men's Health Crisis on my spare time because I wanted to make an impact, to help somebody, to have a voice, because the people that were coming down with AIDS at that time were isolated. They weren't able to be around other people, because not only were they embarrassed themselves, but other people were afraid to be near them. So it was a really sad time. And then we fast forward a little bit more to the end of my biography here. My mom passed away in 1999. It was the worst day of my life, and it still is the worst day of my life. She was my rock. She gave me my conscience. She gave me my morals. She made me understand there were different kinds of people in the world, and you have to respect them. She worked in a hospital with different kinds of, this hospital that she worked in, she had friends of every persuasion. It was literally like the United Nations. She had Jewish friends. She had Black friends. Her best friend was this Black nurse. Her name was Barbara. And I remember that woman was so full of love. And again, when you're raised in a very isolated way, I could, not that I understand it, but people can dismiss difference. I didn't, because I was able to embrace it, and I experienced it. I was around people that were different. I loved it. I love culture. I love different languages. I love different kinds of food. Um, and that just rounded me out. It made me the person I am today. So in '99, when my mom passed away, I just couldn't live in that house anymore. I was done. I needed, I needed to get out of that house, out of New York, because again, it was just me and my mom. I did have an extended family who I still talk to this day. We speak on the phone. I see them every so often, but I just couldn't live there anymore. So what I decided to do was backing up a little bit, I had a friend who lived in the house with me, but he lived in a different apartment. My mom had we used to call them three families. So you had one floor, another floor, another floor. I lived in the middle. He lived on the first floor. And he was a flight attendant, and he said, you need to be a flight attendant. You need to do this. You're getting very depressed, sitting in this house all the time. You love to travel. You need to get away. You need to experience life. And you just break away. You just need to break away. And that's what I did. I broke away. I got a job as a flight attendant, and I moved here to the Twin Cities. And this is where I've been since I was 41. So I made an amazing amount of friends, wonderful friends, very, very closer friends here than I've ever met anywhere else. I mean, people here, when they love you, they love you. They're bound. They're honest. They're loyal. In New York, I had a lot of friends, but maybe because of my age, I was younger, but they were very fleeting. I had friends for a long time, then they would do their thing, and then another group of friends for another long time, and then they do their thing. So it was never a long period of time when I would be with a specific group of friends. But in Minnesota, the friends I have now have been friends of mine since I moved here. And it was in 2001. And then after 9/11, I had to go back, because I was laid off for a little while. I had to go back to New York. And then after that, when I got called back, I did end up selling my house, and I moved here permanently. And in 2009, I met my husband, who is now my husband. An amazing guy. I can't even imagine my life without my husband. He changed my whole life around. I'm the happiest I've ever been right now, and it's because of him. And don't let anybody say that gay relationships are fleeting or they're not the same as straight relationships. That's all a bunch of BS. I know my gay friends out there that are listening to this, they agree with me. It's very, very it's very hard to try to explain to people that aren't gay how the dynamics of our relationships, because we're not as visual. I mean, most gay men or gay women don't really walk in the street holding hands or showing affection in public. We tend to be more discreet about it. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. But so they think that our relationships aren't as profound, and that's totally wrong. But anyway, that's basically a very short synopsis of my life up to now. 19 minutes worth of my biography, my autobiography. And now I'd like to get into, for the last few minutes of this podcast, I'd like to get into what the podcast is going to be about. I'm going to be not talking about myself anymore. Trust me, I will not be doing that. But I will, well, maybe if someone asks me, then I'm interviewing. But I'm going to be interviewing people, influential people, some people who are business owners or man on the street kind of interviews. And I'll be bringing up topics and just asking. I'm not going to be giving. I mean, obviously, if it's a very outlandish answer, I'm gonna chime in. But I really want to get the pulse of the people that are around me and in the Twin Cities area. I do live in a suburb, so I'd like to get also into the Minneapolis area and interview people there, St. Paul, and get a more city view. And then also to the rural areas, because I do have friends that live in the rural areas. I can also speak to people out there. I just want to get people's ideas on different things, because we're so segmented in this country now, especially since the 2016 election. And I just want to get a feel of what people think about different things and why they feel the way they do, and what would their solutions to that problem be, and how do you think we can get people on the same page about that issue. So that's kind of like what I'm aiming at with this podcast. And I call it the Downright Upright podcast because I'm a downright, upright kind of person, and I hope that the people I interview and talk to and speak to also will be frank and honest with me and tell me how they feel, and also, not just criticize everything or agree with everything, but to give solutions, to give remedies to these issues, and see what their idea, or what would lead them to think this can change, or this would be a better way to do something. So anyway, we'll start with some of the issues I want to bring up, like the Ukraine. What do people really want us to help in a more aggressive way? More weapons sent there, obviously more aid. We definitely need more humanitarian aid. That's not controversial at all. These people are just, it's so sad to watch the news. And the fact that he's attacking civilians. That to me is just right there. Is you know, if that's not a war crime, I don't know what is. So I'd like to know what people think we should do as Americans, and what our country, our government should do about it. Should we take a more active role in Ukraine? Should we not take a more active role in Ukraine and just help humanitarian-wise, or maybe light weaponry, or should we go full, shebang, and help them with planes and heavy artillery and stuff like that? So that's one subject I would like to talk about. Another one would be CRT, critical race theory. This one to me blows my mind, because first of all, it's not taught in any public school system in the United States. Now, it is a graduate school class for adults who wish to take it, but it's not taught to children ever. But I think it's a code, CRT, because the way I hear people talk about it is they don't want to hear anything else about slavery, or the way blacks were treated during that time, during the Civil War times, because it will offend, or it hurts the feelings of white people. This is what their version of it is. And to me, you have to teach history. You have to teach it because you learn from history. If you teach fake news, or shield people or students from what really happened, you're doing a disservice to society, a great disservice to society. So that's another subject I'd like to discuss. I'd like to hear what, obviously, what some people who disagree with me feel. I'd like to pick their brain and wonder, why are you afraid to tell your children that this is what happened? Because I think the actual CRT, which is not taught in school, is not the issue at all. It's not the issue at all because it's not taught. And so banning something from being taught when it's not at all is just doesn't make sense, obviously. So but I want to know why they don't want to even learn about slavery or, what happened to African Americans in the South during that time. So that's one issue. Another one I'd like to talk about is the Don't Say Gay bill that just became, it's not a bill anymore, it's a law that passed in Florida. Absolutely insane to me. As a gay man, I'm telling you, if you can't even bring up that you are, a teacher can't even bring up that they have a husband or a wife and they're gay to the students, or the students can't say, well, my two daddies are, da 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 da. If you can't even bring that up in a class when you have, how kids share things in class, they get up and speak and talk about their families sometimes or whatever. I think it's absolutely crazy to make it a law that you can sue the teacher for teaching that gay people exist. Now, the sex part to me is that's all a veneer. That's not happening. No, I don't even think. I don't even think. I know that teachers aren't even teaching children at that age, from kindergarten to third grade, about even straight sex. That's not the time and the place for it. Gay people are not just a ball of sex. It's just that's not what's happening. When you talk about your husband, as I do, it's obvious that I'm gay because I'm saying my husband or showing a picture, my wedding picture. You'll see that's So things like that. If you, by trying to gloss over it and make believe it didn't really happen, or it doesn't exist, or shielding the children, what message are you sending them? Aren't you sending them the message that you really don't think this is good? It's something bad. Yeah. So that's another thing. Abortion, of course. The Supreme Court is going to be making a decision over the summer, I believe, whether Roe versus Wade would stand. That's a precedent. I even took legal studies in school, and I know that precedent is something that is very, very difficult to overturn. But just because now we have 3 Trump-appointed judges who happen to be right-leaning, that all of a sudden the law changes, that's kind of weird to me. So that's another issue. Ketanji Brown Jackson also being voted in by the Senate as a associate justice of the Supreme Court. That is a momentous thing that occurred, a momentous occasion that occurred, because I never thought in my lifetime that would happen. And it happened today, actually, the day I'm recording this. I don't know when you'll hear it, but the day I'm recording this, she was voted as the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, as one of the 9. And the most beautiful thing was that Vice President Harris was able to announce that. So that was just two momentous things happening at one moment. Great, 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 great. I'm so happy. Um, Another subject, inflation, gas prices, things like that. People are saying that that's going to be the downfall of the Biden administration. Well, I don't know any presidents in my lifetime that were able to control inflation. And you blame Jimmy Carter for inflation. He was dealt a pretty bad hand too. So we'll talk about that and what people think could be a way to solve the inflation problem. How could we get gas prices lower? And how are we going to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels? Because that's the whole thing that's causing climate change. And that's another subject, climate change. We have to do something very quickly, because the planet is suffering from, we're burning coal and oil and you name it. So we have to go to cleaner energy, and so that's one solution to get gas out of the equation. COVID-19, I would like to talk about that too. A lot of people lost people that they love, and it was a very sad time. Almost 2 years of quarantining and testing and losing loved ones. It was a very hard time. And socially for this country, we weren't able to invite people into our homes. We had to see them in a park or drive to a parking lot. And I remember a friend of mine, her and I, the way we would hang out is we'd go to a fast food restaurant, and we'd order our food, and then we'd park our cars. So she would face her car one direction, I'd face mine the other, and then our windows would be next to each other, and we would have a conversation like that. I mean, that's the way it was. That's what we did. And now I'm able to have people in my house. I go to their house, hug and kiss again. It's just great that the way things are changing back to, hopefully it'll stay this way. I mean, there's still some variants out there. We're not out of the woods, but it's more of an endemic now than a pandemic, thankfully. But I still want to talk about it and how it affected people's businesses, their personal lives, and what it did for their relationships, how their relationships were affected, whether it be their personal relationships or their relationships with their friends or their relationships with their families, if they lost people, what happened, etc. Whether they believe in the vaccinations, that's an issue, believe it or not, to this day. Another subject, January 6th. That's one of the saddest days in our history. And I'd like to talk about that with people and ask people's opinion about that. What they think, about it, what they think could prevent a further another January 6th. I remember watching it on television the day it happened, and my jaw dropped. I was like, wow, I can't believe we're not living in a banana republic. This is the United States of America. It's absolutely unbelievable that we have people who think that they could just, they don't like the results of an election, so they can go barging into the Capitol and beating up cops and doing all of this nonsense just because they don't like the result. I just said, wow, but I didn't think it was going to be it would ever be like that. I know people get angry when the election doesn't go their way, but I never thought that would ever happen in my country. So that's something I'd like to talk about and get people's opinion, how we can stop that from happening, what their opinion of it is, who is responsible, who should be prosecuted, etc. Um, Voter suppression is another one. Absolutely need to discuss that. When Republicans saw that they were losing in states where they were winning and they lost, they started passing laws that would prevent people of color from voting. I mean, you can't pass water out on a line in Georgia. I mean, really? Why don't you maybe what I would do to solve that problem is, instead of having people waiting for 8 hours on the line, maybe have more polling places? Just a thought, things like that. Book banning is another one. Catcher in the Rye. Books that were banned that we read in high school. Not Catcher in the Rye. I said Catcher in the Rye. I always say that. No, it was To Kill a Mockingbird was banned in some schools. And I remember reading that book in high school, I believe, yeah. Gun control, another subject. Do you think having more guns will prevent murder, or having less? And making only responsible people, making it easier for responsible people to get a gun, and non-responsible people who have had felonies on their record or have been tested as mentally unstable, etc. People that are on the no-fly list because they assaulted flight attendants or misbehaving or have a lash out aggressively. Criminals of any sort. You don't want them to have guns. So I'd like to talk about that. I mean, because I have people in my own circle who think it's great that there's more guns. So I'd like to know what people that think about that and agree with that have to say, and people who don't agree with having more guns. So that's another subject. The death penalty, I mentioned that before. When I went to college, I had to write a paper on that subject, and I am so opposite of what I thought about it back then. I felt that back then it was a way to stop people from killing other people, but I didn't realize that later on that's not that's not going to stop anybody. Punishment should fit the crime, but killing someone, thou shalt not kill, what happened to that, right? So that's another issue. So those are just some. I mean, there's going to be more issues popping up that we don't even know about yet. I mean, something else is going to happen. I will have some lighter subjects. I would like to talk about other things that like people starting businesses and how they started out and became successful, or how the people that wrote books and what made them write a book. That I have a few people lined up to interview about books they wrote. So it's going to be a very interesting show. I promise you, I'm not going to ramble in my podcast. Only this one, because I'm introducing myself basically to the audience, and giving them my background and where I came from and how I became the person I am today, and how I want to make this a better place. I want the Twin Cities and Minnesota to be, and the country as a whole, to be a more unified better place to live. And the only way to do that is we have to get people to understand each other. We really do. I mean, as John Lennon says, imagine all the people. I want people to be able to look at each other and right away not have that preconceived notion of what that person's about by their nationality or their language or their accent or their color or their sexual orientation, but just speaking to the person as a person and getting to know them first. I think that's great. I think that's the way to do it, because otherwise we could always be, I could speak in an echo chamber and speak to, how horrible. I mean, I have obviously I'm definitely left of center, and I could just talk about my issues. But it's good to also try to get people to come around, Somebody was telling me, and I'm going to end with this story, that they were paying right-leaning people money. They tried this to watch CNN just for a little while. They paid them to, and see if they had any change of heart or any difference of opinion of any issues. And they found that 7 or 8, I don't remember the exact, so don't quote me, I think it's 7 or 8% of the people started to understand the other side because they were able to watch different news outlets and learn that people are people. Don't listen, to people who are trying to divide the country and make people hate you because of what you are. So that to me is an example of how using different media, watching different media can maybe bring the country together and have a more harmonious and have more harmonious interactions with other people, because again, I don't live in a bubble. I have family, I have friends that have different beliefs, and I don't want to be the one to upset them, and I don't want them to upset me. So we try to talk about things that are more neutral, or we try to understand each other and try to give them a reason why we feel, and don't lash out and don't get angry and belligerent, So that's probably the goal of this podcast. But it's going to be a lot more interaction with other people. I don't like monologues. Again, I'm doing this as an introduction to so people get to know me and see what subjects are out there and how we can address those issues and subjects. So on that note, I just want to thank AM 950, AM 950, for this wonderful opportunity to do this podcast and for you to be able to share your thoughts with me. And I, again, would like to thank the station and everyone there for embracing me and helping me get through this, because this is my first one. And it's actually going to be the hardest one for me because I'm not good at talking about myself. But I did have to do this because if you don't talk about yourself, people don't know where you're coming from. You have to know where the person's coming from, so you know where they're going. You have to have a point A to go to point B. So anyway, I did exactly 45 minutes. I wanted to get this in just enough time. So thank you all for listening to the Downright Upright Show, and hope to see you or speak to you again in the near future. Thank you, and have a great day.